fewer people from the White House that know what it means.
Okay.
Because
We'll wait for that to be revealed.
the president does not doesn't have time.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm Todd Weinberger from WJEZ Radio, and the Congressman's staff asked me if I'd moderate a little bit. I may have a few questions I will try to sneak in, but it looks like we have an incredible collection of questions here, and we'll get to those in just a moment. And I don't think I need to introduce this gentleman, Congressman Rep Kinzinger. Good evening, sir. Congressman is camera shy, mic shy, so he's not going to say too much. I'm just trying to keep it a little lighthearted here at the beginning. Congressman.
Thank you very much. First off, thank you everybody for being out here. I want to start actually with the Pledge of Allegiance, so let's do that if you guys will join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, thank you all for being out here. I think you all know if you have a question, I guess raise your hand, or we're walking around with cards and everything. We'll get that. I'm not going to take a lot of time at the beginning because I want to get to your questions. I just want to tell you, first off, it is an honor to represent you. So whether you vote for me in here or not, I'm still honored to represent you, and I just want to thank you for that opportunity. There's a lot of anger out there on both sides of the aisle right now, and it's something that really has actually burdened me quite a bit. I don't remember, at least in my life, 39 years, ever seen a time when this country was as divided as it is, and it seems like our ability to have civil debate has kind of fallen by the wayside, and it's turned into violence on the streets and just anger and yelling, and people break up Thanksgiving dinner now because somebody has a different political opinion than them. So I'll tell you, look, my commitment as your representative, you're going to know my opinion. I'm a conservative Republican, but at the same time, I also think we can have respectful conversations and discussions. So I'm going to continue the best I can in Congress to try to bring a civil tone to the debate in a very passionate time. There's some major differences out there and some very serious debates. I'd like to recognize somebody in the audience first, though, and that's your former representative, Tom Ewing, out here. So, Tom, thank you for being out here. Who's actually working the slides? I'm just going to show the first slide here. Okay, if you can just go to the first one. I just want to set this up so that, as we talk about issues as it comes up, this just sets up basically where the federal government spends money. The most important thing we do in Washington, D.C. is determine how we're going to spend your taxes. And I think this is just an important thing to have up there so that it's always hard for me to try to reference federal spending and different things along that line if you can't visualize it. So we'll leave that up there for now. The red, basically when we talk about in Washington doing a budget and passing where we're spending, you hear things about sequester and this kind of stuff. The blue part of that pie chart is the only thing that Congress actually allocates yearly. It's I think $1.1 trillion, about $1.2 trillion. Non-defense discretionary, that's things like Department of the Interior, Health and Human Services, etc. And then defense is obviously defense. But the red is what we call autopilot spending, and that's basically money that is spent regardless of what Congress does, short of changing a law. So you turn 65, you get Social Security, that's included up there. And you see other mandatory, Medicaid, interest, Medicare. Other mandatory includes things like veteran benefits and stuff like that. That interest number, by the way, $241 billion in 10 years is projected to be about $780 billion of that federal spending will be on interest on the debt at record low interest rates, which we're at today. So I just want to leave that up there. I'm going to take your questions, but I may refer to that occasionally, so I just think it's important so that we can visualize it. With that, Mr. Todd.
Well, we're going to start with a fairly deep philosophical question as far as I'm concerned. What can we do to re-strengthen people's faith that representative self-government will work for all of the United States?
Yeah, that is a deep question. It's a really good one. Look, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is like
I think, some of you in here are a little older than me, and you remember back times where it was even more divided or maybe as divided. People feel very disconnected from the government. And I think part of it is you see both parties that are being really drugged to their extremes in some cases. In many cases, Republicans will try to compete for who's more conservative, even if two candidates are, actually plenty conservative. And you see it in the Democrats, where sometimes it's a fight for who's more liberal, even though, both sides are plenty liberal. And so a lot of Americans feel disaffected. All I can say is, all I want to do is try to get back to where we can have regular conversations again. And I think if we can do that, if we can as a people take that pendulum that's swinging to an extreme where people can't talk to each other and just let it kind of come back to where we can have debates, I think that will restore some people's faith. But the other thing is we just need to listen to what folks have to say and not necessarily fight just to win a primary, but fight for the will of the district. So I wish I had a better answer. I think if I did, I'd probably be a billionaire because I could probably sell that as an idea or a book. But all I can do is the best I can on that level.
This next question is involved, so I will make sure that I try to do justice to the right here. Given the President's reluctance to act on entitlement reform and the House's medical package that raises age-based premiums, do you see this as the beginning of a piece-by-piece incorporation of Ryan's vision of America?
All right, let me try to piece that all together. So given Trump's inability to act on entitlement reform and the House's medical package. So let's talk about health care for a second. I think there is a lot that is misunderstood about the Republican bill of health care. What we know right now is under the current health care law, a lot of people have very high premiums and very high deductibles. So if you're a family that makes $50,000, $70,000 a year, and your health care basically says you're going to pay a $15,000 deductible and you're going to pay a couple $1,000s a month in premiums, and I've talked to a lot of people that have something like that, you're paying in essence $30,000 in medical expense before you even see the first dollar. So in some cases, that's like writing on a piece of paper covered and just handing it to you and saying, now you have coverage. What we try to do in our replacement plan is to strengthen the individual market, to strengthen the markets for the health insurance piece. Now there's three sides to this. So first is this piece of the plan. The second is what will come out of HHS, which is Tom Price's stuff, out of the government there. And then the third is what we think can be actual serious bipartisan changes to the health care law. So what are those? Cross-state competition for insurance. That is something that, I gotta tell you, Republicans and Democrats actually really agree on in total. So there's things like that we think we can pass in that third tranche. But in the first one, look, we know this. There's a lot of talk about this doesn't cover pre-existing conditions. I mean, I've heard all the talking points. They say it doesn't cover pre-existing conditions. Actually, it does. Now, is there a case where somebody, what they say is if you drop continuous coverage and you try to, in essence, play the system where you don't have health insurance until you get a big medical condition, and then you pick up health insurance for that medical condition, so they cover your medical condition, and then you're healed, and you drop health insurance, what happens is what you're seeing right now, which is these companies are having to skyrocket premiums to be able to afford and to stay in business. Now, if your vision is government-run healthcare, which I'm sure some in here it is, and that's fine, that's not mine. If that's your vision, this collapsing system is actually the way to get there because people are not having the coverage they need right now. But if you want a system that works, what we do is we actually induce competition within the insurance companies to make them compete for your business. If you're in that range that I've heard about people say, 50 to 64 is going to have skyrocketing premiums, we added billions of dollars to buy down those premiums for people. And so, look, this is a very misunderstood bill, but when it's all said and done, what we want to do is to create a system that works for the American people. And if this fails, if the Republican repeal effort fails, it's imperative for Republicans and Democrats to get together and say, what do we have to do to make life better for the American people? And I think that's essential. There was way more to that, but I don't want to dominate just by speaking. I'll say this just lastly. We do have to deal with entitlement reform. It's like feeding spinach to people. It's not easy to hear. It's way easier as a politician to sit in front of you and say, I'm never going to touch anything related to Social Security because all I care about is what my next election is. The truth is, though, If you even look at your Social Security statement, it says that in 2025, I think is the year now, you're going to get a reduced benefit because the trust fund will run out of money. So let's fix it. I don't have to fix it for people in or near retirement now, but I'm 39 years old. You can make changes to Social Security for somebody my age and save the system for current seniors that in and near retirement. It's not easy to talk about, but in my mind, I've talked to a lot of Democrats and Republicans that say we've got to fix this. We're just too scared of the political implications of it.
Moving on to another issue that raises passion in a lot of folks. What is the fate of public education with Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education?
Look, I'm a huge believer in public education. My mom's a public school teacher, just retired. She teaches down at Unit 5 in Normal. My dad ran a homeless shelter, retired a few years ago. Both Republicans, surprisingly. Somehow they created a Republican too. Look, I'm a strong believer in public education. I'm a strong believer that we have to come together and make sure we're funding and everybody has an equal opportunity to access education. And so look, as far as what's the future under Betsy DeVos, I know there's a lot of people that are scared of her. I'm not. I happen to think she has a passion for children and passion for children in pretty disadvantaged areas. But for me, in my role in Congress, in my role representing you, I want to make sure we have plenty of funds for public education and that everybody has an opportunity to get a good public education, which is exactly what I did. I went to public school and I'm really proud that I did.
This is a somewhat related question, and it's a little involved. I am a lawyer.
And it's pre-printed.
It is. Somebody is prepared for
Yeah.
this. We respect that. I am a lawyer, and many of my law school colleagues took low-paying public service jobs and relied on their student loans being discharged after a period of time by the Department of Education. Under President Trump's tax plan, this program is threatened. What is your position on this matter? And if you support the elimination of the program, what would you tell to people who entered public service and feel lied to?
You discharge in terms of what? I guess.
In terms of student loan relief, I think is what they're getting at. In the
Oh,
terms of public
I
service.
got you. Okay, so in many cases, it's a loan relief program that occurs if people, I think, take a job in disadvantaged areas for less pay. Look, I gotta say it's about Trump's budget. I'm going to just be upfront. It's not going anywhere. In fact, we put to give you an example of how presidential budgets usually received, which was be bipartisan here. We put President Obama's last budget on the floor of the House, and it got 0 votes, by the way, including Nancy Pelosi didn't vote for it. A presidential budget's a blueprint that basically shows here's kind of what we envision, this is what we want to set the debate. I think President's budget, look, I agree with the boost in military spending, but I also think the cuts on the domestic side were entirely too deep. We need to be funding cancer research. We talked about Biden's cancer moonshot that was talked about. Let's do what we can to research and try to defeat this disease of Alzheimer's, all the different cancers we see. You want to fix medical spending? You want to fix the amount of money we spend in this country? Let's beat Alzheimer's because we spend a lot of money treating patients with Alzheimer's. So let's use our technology and our investments to do that in NIH and elsewhere. I will tell you those cuts are not going to happen in this Congress. That doesn't mean we're going to inflate budgets everywhere. But what I think needs to happen, and I want to say this in a big way, the red stuff over here, let's figure out how to get that right, and then we can spend more on the blue stuff too. And let's grow this economy. We have I'm sure in this room, all different opinions on how to grow the economy, but I think we can all agree if the economy grows, there's more tax money that goes to the federal government. So let's grow the economy. But let's make some of the tough choices that need to be made. Let's be honest with the American people and say, look, for younger people, we can make changes to some of this red stuff in order to save it for those that require it now. But again, it's not easy to do. There's a lot of people that'll stand up and just tell you what you want to hear and hope you applaud.
Well, sir, we have a lot of questions about health care. So we're
Okay,
going to jump right into that just a little bit.
I hear that's an issue out there.
I think so. This question, again, a little more involved, and I'll try to do justice to inflecting it here. As a member of the Wisconsin National Guard and also a representative in Congress, I assume you are covered by TRICARE for health insurance.
Yep.
What is your own personal experience with government coverage, and would you recommend TRICARE to other people if they had the choice to use it?
So yeah, I mean, look, if you're in the military, TRICARE is available to you. It's a benefit we give to those in the military and in the reserves, and so I do TRICARE. Now my staff is on the Affordable Care Act. They're on Obamacare. Members of Congress, if you're not eligible for TRICARE, you're on Obamacare or on your spouse's plan. So when the ACA was passed, actually Congress wrote itself in to the law to say we're no longer eligible for FEHB, federal employee health benefits, which every federal government employee has. So I'll tell you, my experience with the healthcare law, with Obamacare, when I was on it, wasn't good. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't think I had great coverage, so I switched to TRICARE, which as a member of the Guard is my right. And I think if somebody is in the military and uses TRICARE, they probably have good stories and bad stories about it, just like probably any health coverage.
I'm going to sneak in my own question.
All right.
Because I don't want anyone to think that I am editing the questions. It's just some of the things that we have here are things that the Congressman has already covered, and I'm trying to give as much variety to his comments as we can. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm censoring the
And I try to answer quick so we can get through as many as we can.
Well, and we will.
And plus, you guys don't like when we filibuster, do you? Although we can be good at it if we want to be.
My question to you is, during the campaign, candidate Trump was not the person you endorsed, not the person you selected. Now that he's President Trump, how are things going for you?
That's a great question. Look, I have no about the campaign whatsoever. I always said, when I got into this job, I don't intend this to be an extremely long-term career. I don't want to do this forever. I got into this because I really want to make an impact and a difference. And, I just passionately believe in what I'm doing. And so when it came down to some of the things said in the campaign, I was very critical of it. And I continue to be very critical of it. Now that he's president, look, I've said this. I will criticize when necessary, and I will support when I can. Even with President Obama, while I was critical because we disagreed on probably almost everything in policy, I did my best not to, and I'm sure there were times when I slipped up and did, but I did my best not to attack him as a person and to attack him personally. I would talk about differences, whether it's foreign policy, whatever. But to me, I always thought President Obama himself was an honorable man. He has great kids, a great wife, great family man. We just disagreed a lot on politics. With President Trump, look, I have been critical even while he's president in certain areas, but I also have been supportive in other areas. Personally, I think his foreign policy has actually been pretty good. I think watching him put America back on the world stage has been something that for me as a Republican, as an American, I love to see. So for me, it's like I will continue. I will be as supportive as possible when I can. He's the President of the United States. He's a Republican like me. But if there's a tweet or something that comes out, and I think as a representative of the 16th District I need to be vocal about it, I will. But truthfully, I'll tell you this, as a Republican, there's a lot I've been pretty happy about. But some of the things you said I haven't. So, look, I feel at peace with where I am on that, and I'll continue to act that way.
Would you like to respond to this gentleman, or should we keep going?
Let's keep going with the comments. Okay. Well, you know what we don't do? We don't disrupt. If we start, we have a format here that we're going to follow through on, because everybody wrote in questions and it's fair.
What is your position on the possibility of the president backing out of the Paris Climate Treaty, and who would benefit from this is one question. And there's a related question that we'll also share. Do you believe in human-caused climate change? If so, what do you think the government should do?
Well, I do believe in it. Let me say this. I actually would advise the president to not pull out of the treaty, but to say this. There's two different views of how you can deal with the issue of carbon pollution, global warming, climate change. One is the heavy-handed government. The other is the free market. What we've actually seen is through free market innovation, the amount of clean energy that's being produced through free market, through profit motive, has actually increased in a significant way. You look at nuclear power. The district we live in, the 16th Congressional District, has 4 nuclear power plants, the most of any in the country. Nuclear power is great for an economy. It gives people a fantastic paycheck. It's great for the local school district, and it is completely carbon-free power, carbon-free emissions. I think through free market ways we can solve this issue. What I don't like is when the federal government comes down And people, I'll tell you what I've learned about Washington, D.C. I always thought before I got elected that there was some like brain trust in Washington, D.C. that knew way more than me that came up with these policies. They're not. They're just people. And in many cases, you have bureaucrats and people in Washington, D.C. that sit around, think they know more than the people back home, and come up with policies that utterly destroy the economy. So when it comes to this issue, I think everybody can agree, whether you actually agree in climate change or not, whether you believe it exists or not, through the free market, we can make better energy for everybody. And so for me, I would advise the president not to pull out. I would advise him to say, we're going to change our view from saying the heavy hand of government and mandates to incentivizing the free market to fix this problem. So that's what I would do.
We have a collection of questions here that are just outstanding. Some are very broad, some are very specific, so we will just keep trying to get as many as we can. While we've been talking about climate change and environmental issues, what will Representative Kinzinger do to protect the environment and drinking water under threat of contamination by the Dakota Access Pipeline?
Okay. Well, look, I think when it comes to Dakota Access Pipeline, I support it. I think being able to transfer energy through pipelines is actually way more friendly to the environment than driving them on trucks and trains. So I think that's essential. Now, in terms of any kind of drinking water contamination, from the studies I've seen, that is not a concern. There are people that that have shown studies that it is a concern. The environmental studies have been done, and I'm supportive. There's nobody, by the way, in the country that I've ever talked to that wants contaminated drinking water. And a lot of the times in leading questions, I'm not saying this is or not, but people lead a question with saying basically, if you support this, then you support contaminating America's drinking water. And I think that's obviously not the case whatsoever.
I guess it had to come to this, so I will
Okay, here we go.
do this that way. Do you consider that the collusion of the Trump campaign with Russia a treasonable offense?
It took longer than I thought.
I'm working my way through this.
Look, I'll say this about when it comes to Russia and the Trump issue. Every story that comes out is reacted to as if it's an 11 on a 10 scale, right? Every new piece of information, it's this, the world's burning, everything's going, I called for an independent investigation for what ended up being a special counselor, because I said, look, we just need to get to the bottom of anything that happened. Now, if there's anybody in the campaign that had anything improper to do with Russia, we need to find that out. If there is something somewhere in the campaign where there was something improper, we need to find that out too. But what I don't like is, in some cases, when a piece of information comes out, there are some that say every new piece of information is completely false and fake news and we're not even taking into account. And I hear some people that when there's something that's unconfirmed that comes out in the paper, they're screaming impeachment. Okay, let's just get to the bottom of what happened. Let's just find out, and ultimately we, the American people, deserve answers, and then we'll move on. I think to immediately jump to the thing that there was collusion, in my mind, between Russia and Trump, we don't know anything yet. After 7 months of investigation, there's not been one single piece of evidence to point to Donald Trump colluding with the Russians. There's questions with people around him in meetings they had, and those are answers I want to find out. In fact, when General Flynn was recommended to be NSA, I was very public about it. I like a lot of Donald Trump's pick. I don't like General Flynn, and I think he was a bad pick. And I think that bore itself out. So we are gonna drive ourselves, I think, into a tizzy if every new piece of information, and there's going to be plenty of it on both sides that come out, drives us into this kind of 11. I mean, we're all on, it's like having a car engine and you're in red light constantly. We all are. I think let's let Robert Mueller do his job. Let's find out what the answers are, and ultimately let's do the work of the American people.
Another broad topic, but when can we expect introduction of a major infrastructure bill?
I hope soon. There are 3 big priorities that the president has, that we have too. One is healthcare, very divisive issue. The next is tax reform, which I think has the potential to have some bipartisanship. And the third is infrastructure, which I think has the potential for real bipartisanship. So the infrastructure in this country is crumbling. And this is where I talk about having adult conversations, so I'm going to do this for a second here if we could. Too many roads and bridges are falling apart. Too many small towns have aging sewer and water. A lot of small towns were built. Pontiac's a great town. It's got, good influx of capital coming into it. Your city leadership has been able to stay ahead of the curve in terms of that issue. But there's a lot of small towns out there, 40 or more Livingston County, that have 70-year-old sewer systems, 70-year-old water systems. They were built on the rail line, maybe only had it repaired once. There's some towns that don't have good access to broadband. Some areas where kids still have to go to the library to do their homework assignment, when right now every kid in kind of a major city is sitting home with a tablet to do their homework assignment. So I think getting a hold of this infrastructure is extremely important. Now there's two issues to it. I want $1 trillion infrastructure bill, but we got to pay for it. You can't put it into debt. Point to this, that interest number is going to only continue to skyrocket as we continue to build ourselves into debt. But I think we have to have a grown-up conversation about how we're funding it. I frankly think we're going to have to talk about raising the gas tax to an extent. A gas tax is simply a user fee. It's a user fee to use the highway system. It's not a tax. It basically says if you want to go use the interstate system, instead of paying a toll through your iPass, you fill up the car and you're going to pay a toll through the gas line. So either we have to talk about that or find a new way to fund our infrastructure. Because I'll tell you, as a fiscal conservative, I actually think being a fiscal conservative is not just about saying I'll never raise taxes, but it's about saying how do we balance the budget and pay for the things we need today instead of making our kids pay for it tomorrow. And right now, when we're building roads and bridges, and we're doing that, we have a funded highway plan, a highway bill. We pretend like that, through moving money here and there, we pretend like we've paid for the infrastructure. Truthfully, we didn't. Truthfully, it's going to go into debt. And it's like buying a Ford Fusion today and signing your kid's name to it who's like 1 year old and saying he'll pay for it when he turns 16 or 17 years old or when he gets a job. And so I think, look, there's going to be some that, Kinzinger wants to raise taxes. I don't want to raise taxes. But I'll tell you what I do want to do. I want to pay for top quality roads and bridges in this country because it's not just about not hitting a bump when you're driving your car. It's about being able to get trucks and trains and boats where they need to go to move goods faster so that we can produce more goods and serve more people around the world with that stuff. And it's bringing that 21st century infrastructure and making sure that every kid, I'm the chairman of the Rural Broadband Caucus in Congress, it's making sure that every kid has an opportunity to access the world of the internet and the information at his or her fingertips so he or she can learn and compete with everybody else, not just in this country, but in this world.
I'm going to ask a bit of a follow-up while we're talking about infrastructure. Obviously, federal money is going to come to the state of Illinois. Then it's going to be distributed, and we all live in the state of Illinois. Is that going to be a problem?
Probably. I don't know. No, I say that tongue-in-cheek. Look, Illinois' got to get its act together. I say this jokingly, and it's sad that it's funny, but I said the good thing about Springfield is it makes us in D.C. look highly functional. It's like we have our act together. There's plenty of blame to go around. I don't want to throw blame everywhere. I'm going to say this. The guy that's been in office longer than I've been alive, the Speaker of the Illinois House, has got to come to the table as well and has to compromise. It is time for us to make reforms in Illinois. We're not losing people. Illinois, Chicago, we just saw, the only major city to lose population. We're not losing people to India, we're losing them to Indiana. Indiana, we're losing them to Wisconsin and Iowa and Kentucky. They have the same weather we do, so people aren't fleeing for a warmer climate. They're fleeing because of the business climate in this state. And so I think you all make your own decision on that. I'm a federal legislator. But I got to tell you, my hope and my prayer is every day that Springfield can get its act together.
Can we just take a moment and ask a bit of a procedural question?
Emails probably every week or so. What we do is we take that information and I get kind of a readout of where people's opinions are, what they're thinking, and then we make sure we respond to that and see that. Now, if somebody sends us 3 messages about the same issue, you'll get 1 response because that's how it works. But we get issues, people that'll write things about maybe the stream rule of coal. Some people that'll write about healthcare. We get some people that'll write about horse slaughter. You'll get issues from all kinds of stuff from all around. So it'll be interesting, in fact, to see it. Sometimes it'll be an issue I didn't even know existed out there that we'll get 100 contacts on. And so I always encourage people, look, even if you think I'm going to vote the way you want me to, or you think I'm not going to vote the way you want me to, our job is to hear what you have to say. And so continue to reach out and try to contact. Now, we have 700,000 people in the district. It's a huge district. It goes all the way up to Wisconsin. We touch the southern tip of Wisconsin. But, I'm going to do the best I can. And my staff, I have a fantastic staff that tries to work their tail off. And by the way, just a quick plug, too, on top of that. People tend to think of congressmen as just, and their staff as just kind of shepherding opinions, taking opinions and going to vote. One of the most important things my office does, and Congressman Ewing will tell you this from his time in, is we handle people with constituent casework. If you're a veteran and you've had trouble with the VA, or you have trouble getting your awards, I just gave a guy some of his awards from Desert Storm yesterday, or you have a problem with Social Security, we can do our best to try to cut through some of that red tape. And I really am amazed every day how well my staff does. And Casey and Bonnie are here, Casey and Bonnie, and how well they do to try to shepherd through that stuff. So thank you for paying your taxes so I can hire good staff and have them try to help you the best they can.
We have a question that brings things home to Pontiac here, where of course there's a major correctional facility. What is your opinion on for-profit prisons?
That's a good question. Look, I don't like the idea necessarily of a prison making money on holding people, but I also think at the same time, in many cases, some of these towns have found themselves in a position where they can't afford to build proper housing stuff for prisoners, and in many cases, they're spending a lot of money sending prisoners to otherwhere into housing. So, for me, look, I don't have a strong opinion either way on it. I'll tell you this, though, we need to make sure from a prison perspective and from the ability to house prisoners that people are treated well, that they have the infrastructure they need. And secondly, I want to say this. I think we do need reform in the criminal justice system in terms of when it comes to drug abuse. Drug abuse is a huge problem. Last year, we lost more people for the first time in this country's history to opiate overdoses than we did to guns. It is skyrocketing as a problem. So in my view, when you take somebody that is a user of a drug and you condemn them to the prison, in many cases they find themselves in a culture where it only encourages them to use again. Now, there's laws out there and you have to enforce laws against criminals. But I think we also need to put funding into giving people hope and recovery. We did that through a bill we passed that was signed by President Obama last year, and it's funded now fully, but I think we need even more. If you are an addict, if you find yourself, we've all had those mornings you wake up and you feel regret for something. I'm not going to tell you what any of mine ever were, but you wake up and you have that moment in your life where you say, if you're a heroin user, you say, I need to get help. You only have about an hour, maybe 2 hours, where you are actually able to go get help before the addiction takes over again. And in some of our small communities, and the sheriffs here, he'll probably tell you, and any medical professionals that are here will tell you they probably run into people that want to get help, but by the time they can get them into treatment, the addiction's taken back over. And so I think that is a burden that we have as a local, state, and federal government to try to create that, put that infrastructure in place.
While we're talking about some issues here locally, Livingston County, of course, dominated by agribusiness, what is the current status of the Waters of the U.S. regulation?
So that was held up by the courts, and it will not be implemented. And that was the one that basically regulated any standing water in agriculture. That was, I forgot who sued, but the courts upheld, actually blocked the implementation of Waters of the United States, and it's been rescinded. So there we go.
A couple of questions here on international questions, especially where the president is concerned. President Trump has instructed multiple international leaders to no longer call him on secure presidential telephone lines and instead ask him to contact him on his own personal unsecured cell phone. How can we keep America safe when our president is discussing matters of national and worldwide security on an unsecured cellular phone?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard that, so I don't necessarily know that to be true. If it is, I'll look, but I haven't heard that he's instructed multiple leaders to call him on a cell phone and not on a secure phone. I will say, look, we all know if you talk to somebody on a cell phone, it easily can be intercepted by any intelligence agency or by an enemy intelligence agency. So in general, if any of you ever talk to world leaders, I recommend trying to get us to get in line.
A more political question, what is your feeling about Jared Kushner, the aide to the president? Are you in favor of lifting his security clearance?
Well, look, the president has a lot of leverage to put whoever he wants around him, but we need to figure out, Jared Kushner, if he met with the Russian ambassador or Russian banker, this is part of the investigation. Find out what was said and why it was said. Now, it is true, when you're in office, when you're the president, there are a lot of backdoor communications, I forget the exact, whatever they're calling it, kind of, yeah, other communications, ways to talk, back channel, thank you. Back channel communications with other world leaders. It's happened under President Obama, President Bush, Clinton, all the way back. It is also very dangerous if in fact this happened. And again, all I know is a media report. If this happened as a transition team, that's when it's a little different. If you are negotiating against an administration that's in office, we operate under the fact that we only have one president at a time, even during a transition period. So that's part of the questions that I want answered with this independent investigation. In terms of just pulling it now, I don't think we have the information to do that. The president, again, has a lot of leverage to put whoever he wants around him as the president-in-chief, just as John F. Kennedy put Bobby Kennedy around him. People have that's a luxury we give the president.
On a completely unrelated topic, will you support Planned Parenthood and women's health care? And if not, why not?
I support women's health care, but I do not support giving tax money to an organization that provides abortion services. Simple, huh?
Well,
No, it's not simple.
Simple answer, not a simple problem.
I was just going to ask, how do you draw that line? Because I understand what you're saying. You're talking about a philosophical opposition, particular procedures. But where do they mesh, and where is the line drawn when you're talking about women's health care? That's a whole spectrum of services. Can you give us just a little more detail on your feeling?
Well, as the president said to Planned Parenthood, if you guys quit providing abortion service, then we're not going to pull funding from you. We're going to put the same amount of money, by the way, that was going to Planned Parenthood into community health centers, into women's health care. But look, I'm pro-life. And I believe that tax money should not go to provide abortion services.
It does not.
It never has.
You
It
know what?
never
That's
has.
the opinion of
It
a lot of
doesn't.
people in the 16th district.
Do you not know
and
the
a lot
facts?
of people in this country. It is a violation of federal law through the Hyde Amendment to pay for abortion services through tax
It
funds.
does not happen.
Money's fungible. You can move money around. And so look, I oppose funding Planned Parenthood with tax money.
To prevent people from getting abortions. That's what they do. They prevent abortions by providing women with reproductive services.
I appreciate everybody's passion. We're going to move on with the submitted questions. And the congressman would be happy to talk to any of his constituents about these issues. All right. So we won't take any more time. How will you vote on net neutrality?
Well, there's not a vote on net neutrality. It actually comes through the FCC. The FCC is in the process of figuring out what to do on that, and I believe that they're going to rescind what was done under the Obama administration.
We have a question that's rather confrontational, so I'll ask something a little lighter first, just as a prelude. My question is, you make
Are you
a lot
supposed to punch me when you ask me or something?
No. Just try to keep some variety here. You make a lot of appearances on the cable news networks. You make a lot of appearances even on the very venerable Sunday morning shows, which feed the news cycle for the first few days of each week. How does that happen? Can you give us just a brief description? I mean, does Wolf Blitzer just send you a text message and say today of the day, or how do they find Adam Kinzinger to be a spokesperson?
So, the first few years in Congress, I didn't do a lot of national television, and, because frankly, you have to, the longer you're in, you kind of get, I guess, known as having expertise in certain areas. And I think in D.C. and Congress and the Senate, there's unfortunately I think a lack of foreign policy knowledge, and it's something that happens to be a passion of mine. You know, America's role in the world, America's mission. You know, for instance, I called for bombing ISIS before anybody else did, as far as I know. I didn't see anybody else call for it first. I was a huge advocate supporting President Obama in enforcing the red line in Syria. And through those kinds of actions, you know, you end up basically, people see this and they want to have you on to talk about it. So my view is this, you know, I'm not going to become, and I'm not doing it for this reason, you're not going to become famous doing CNN. I walk around the airport, you don't have people that run around and try to get your autograph and pictures, nobody knows who I am. But for me, to be able to take an issue that I'm passionate about, for instance, America's role in the world, destroying the cancer of ISIS, you know, and talking about that the war on terror is not just about fighting current terrorists, it's about what happens with the next generation, right? The 7 and 8-year-olds that right now are in refugee camps and that are displaced, that are not getting the education they need. They are going to be in 5 years a fertile recruiting ground for ISIS or for the next generation of ISIS that comes along. So the importance of being able to ensure that women and kids have an opportunity, even in other parts of the world, to get an education, to learn about a broader world out there, because somebody that's smart and has hope and can read and write is way less likely to be recruited to an extremist organization. So being able to talk about that, if you go on Wolf Blitzer, it's typically 800,000 or 900,000 people, is something that, to me, I'm passionate about. And I hope and I think actually represents the district well in the process.
On that note, here's the question I was giving you a little breather in anticipation of. Will you consider working for the people of the 16th rather than your corporate donors?
I work for the people of the 16th Congressional District.
That's it? Jumping back to the education question, this is a bit more on the grassroots level. What's your stance on vouchers for education?
So look, I actually believe that in supporting public education. I think when you put vouchers in the entire system, it can destabilize it. I do support charter schools. I support opportunity. But at the same time, I believe that we have to have a very robust public education system. But also, schools need to be held accountable. If you have a failing school, it should not be, the status quo should not be accepted and acceptable. I think we have to rethink, I'll say this very briefly, how we do education in some cases. You know, we're still educating kids. In many cases, you're sitting them down with 20 people in front of a teacher. We have fantastic teachers, but that teach kids the same way they did 200 years ago. Now with technology and with you know, different job opportunities available, let's figure out how we educate kids in the best way. I think kids in high school should be introduced to manufacturing as a career too. You know, we used to have this belief that you have to go to college, and if you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. I heard that in the last 10 or 20 years. If you go to certain schools, actually in the northern part of the district, in the Rockford area, kids in 8th, 9th, and 10th grades are taking field trips of manufacturing facilities, and we're saying to them, look, we'd love you to go to college. We'd love you to go to technical school. These are good jobs that are available here in Illinois for you, so that we stop exporting not just goods, but we're exporting our kids from Illinois to other places. So I think being able to introduce kids to opportunities when they're young, beyond just saying you have to go to college right away, I think is important.
There's a bit of a follow-up question built in, and the individual who wrote this question, it said, would a voucher system require private churches to pay taxes and accept anyone in their parochial schools?
I guess it depends how it's written. You know, look, I've gotten this question a few times in terms of, I guess there's a concern with some of the tax money going to churches. I don't know where that comes from, and I don't know why there would be any hostility against churches. As a Christian, I can say that. But let me say this. If you go to certain areas in certain communities, I think specifically in Chicago, some challenged areas there, church plays a very important role in a lot of people's lives. And when we look at, for instance, the gang violence in the south side of Chicago, not far north of where I live, in Shanahan, in In some cases, you may be just as likely to be caught in stray gunfire as you are in certain parts of Afghanistan. And so what does that come down to? It comes down to an 8-year-old kid that feels unsafe. Somebody comes along, puts their arm around him and says, we'll protect you. We'll give you a way to make money, talks them into selling drugs, and gives them protection by the fellow gang, and they join. And it's a perpetual cycle in some cases. I actually think, frankly, that some of the biggest hope for the future of challenged areas can be the church, can be faith-based communities. We sure ain't government.
We've run the gamut of a lot of the questions. We still have a lot of questions about health care, so I think we can swing back in that direction. This is a question about Medicaid funding. How will Medicaid funding cuts impact our local nursing homes and the people they serve? And in a related question, how will Medicaid cutting affect disabled children in the public schools?
Well, it won't, because we basically put Medicaid on a budget for the first time. We make sure that it's targeted to exactly what it was intended to at the beginning, the disabled and the poor. So what happened under the Medicaid expansion is you took people up to 130% of poverty and you basically gave them a Medicaid benefit. What this bill does is it says you can continue to, an expanded state like Illinois can continue to follow through that until 2020, in which case if you're on at that point, you can stay on in the enhanced rate. But basically what the federal government did is it gave incentives in the state of Illinois and then begins to take those incentives and dollars away so that the state of Illinois ends up taking on the bulk of this. It's kind of a little sweetener at the beginning that's going to cost you again. And it basically says you can stay on this expanded. But in that certain range from 100% to 130%, the folks that initially Medicaid was not intended to be targeted to, if you cycle off and then cycle back on, you come back at the traditional federal match. Do you know that in all the years we've had Medicaid, we have no real budget number? We have no idea how much we've actually spent on it because we've never taken the numbers. So what we do is we see over the next couple of years how much Illinois spends on Medicaid, and then we basically grant Illinois that amount of money plus medical CPI plus 1%, which is actually quite a bit of money. And we allow the state of Illinois and other states to innovate for the first time without the heavy hand of the federal government. Now, it's always easier to stand in front and say we're going to just throw more money at things. But I'm going to tell you what I believe is better is to help Medicaid and to help, healthcare programs create a better situation for people and not just throwing more money at it. And then, by the way, those in the individual market, it's only 7%, but those in the individual market that are being failed right now by the current ACA, by the current healthcare law, actually get more money, advanceable tax credits from the federal government to shop on the market for health insurance and allow health insurance to actually compete for your business instead of sitting around saying, yeah, you desperately need us, what can we do for you? Did you know, by the way, that I think it's, whatever the latest number, seems like 10 counties in Illinois' 16th district, a significant number of counties, 16th district, only have one provider available to them now. And those providers are now thinking about pulling out too.
We just had an interesting question submitted. This has to do with privacy, which of course is another huge issue for folks today. You voted to allow internet providers to sell their customers' internet history. Can you please provide the context for who you voted in support of in voting for that law?
So, again, another majorly misunderstood issue. So what happened
Of course.
is basically under the Obama administration, the FCC in essence power grabbed the ability to regulate privacy. Well, they always had the ability to regulate privacy. So it was the NTCA that basically was going to create a whole new privacy regulation. By the way, it never actually happened. It was just basically a rule writing. And basically we reversed that to say the FCC should continue to be the regulatory of people's privacy information. So this idea that somehow now we basically, I've read the comments, that somehow we now want to sell people's internet history is just completely untrue, but it's a misunderstood issue.
All right, I actually intended to bring this up a moment ago, but this is another Illinois-centric question. As a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, do you support the current administration's plan to subsidize energy sources such as coal, and they refer to those sources as obsolete.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. I don't understand how the administration is going to be subsidizing coal. What I do understand is the administration is not going to quit trying to put coal out of business. There are a lot of coal miners, by the way, that lost their job. And just as I think the free market can work to bring us to cleaner energy sources, natural gas right now is extremely inexpensive. That's a very clean source of energy, and you can thank the energy revolution for that, that we can now do that. In fact, we're beginning to export natural gas to our allies, which counters the Russian threat in Eastern Europe, as well as anything else, makes us an energy powerhouse in the world. But there are people that still burn coal. There's coal-fired plants in the United States. There's coal-fired plants all over China. But this idea that we're going to unilaterally disarm and put people out of business, that have worked really hard to make pay, to make something for their family, I believe that the free market works its will here. And so I am completely supportive of the president ending the war on coal that exists.
The budget, of course, has been a huge discussion in the different media sources within the halls of Congress. How can you back or vote for a budget with $1 trillion mathematical mistake?
I guess I don't know what the $1 trillion mathematical mistake is in it. If you're talking about a budget, if we're talking back to the president's budget, as I mentioned, it's not something that I'm supportive of. Let me say this about the State Department. We increased military spending in that president's budget, but it cut State Department by 30 or 40%. You guys know my position on foreign policy. And in many cases, when it comes to ISIS and stuff, I've advocated for the use of the military because sometimes you have to take back land. But I also think there's a very important role for the State Department to play around the world. It is way cheaper to have a conflict mitigation program in a certain country than it is for me to drop a 500-pound bomb on a potential enemy. A 500-pound bomb can be $1 million to $2 million, but a good conflict prevention program, which you never see the results of because the conflict never happened, right? It's like seeing the terrorist attacks that never happened because law enforcement stopped them. In many cases, the State Department plays that role that we never see. So I agree with what Secretary Mattis said when he said that it is way cheaper for him to fund the State Department than to fund a war.
I apologize. Here it is. This is an issue that I'm not familiar with. We'll see what your feeling is. How can you vote for killing hibernating bears and cubs and baby wolves in Alaska?
I really have no idea what that is. So, how can I vote for that?
The person asking the question believes you voted for it.
I don't think I've ever voted to kill hibernating bears. I'm going to leave it at that because I don't know what else to say to that. If kill hibernating bears bill came up before me, I'd vote no.
There was a question. Here it is. Again, this is pure politics. I heard there were 3 Democrats that are running against you in 2018. What's your opinion of them, and do you feel the 16th district is legitimately threatened to change to blue?
I don't take anything for granted. Frankly, I don't know much, if anything, about the Democrats running, and I will pay attention at some point, but they have a primary to go through. And so I'll be interested to see who makes it through the primary. And then, as I said, I don't take anything for granted. I'll continue to work my tail off, and we'll go from there. But it's very early right now. I've got the focus, which is trying to do the work in Washington, D.C., and on weekends when we're not in session, I'm home, traveling around. So when we get closer to election time, I'll pay attention. And I wish all 3 or 4, however many of the candidates are in the race for the Democratic Party, good luck. And somebody's going to win that, and we'll have a nice spirited campaign.
In 2020, there's a gentleman named Richard Durbin. He'll be running for re-election or deciding to retire. Would you ever consider tossing your hat completely out of the House of Representatives and into the Senate?
No, you never say what you would or wouldn't consider. I'll tell you this, though. I love doing my job here. I love this job. And my focus and my intention, if I decide to run again in 2020, would be to run for the House in 2020. You never say, you never know. And that's far enough off that you never know. But my focus is here right
just a few minutes left. We do
And
have
2020 is a presidential year too, so everybody's focus is going to be on that.
President Trump has decided to change our position on Cuba. Why, when we have finally begun to develop a beginning to normalizing American-Cuban relations, would we back away from them now?
So I don't know if he's actually officially made that change yet. I've read some of the things in the paper and on the internet about what he's considering doing, and I don't know the details of what that is. Does that mean he's getting back to a travel ban? Does that mean, I really don't know. I'll just say generally something, and that is the Cuban people are very oppressed. And I do believe that what we've done for the last 60 years hasn't worked. I do believe that it'd be great for Illinois agriculture to be able to export our stuff to Cuba. But at the same time, I do have a lot of compassion for the fact that there are people that don't have basic freedoms 90 miles off our shore. So in general, I've been supportive of re-engagement with Cuba, but I want to see what the details of President Trump, if in fact this stuff is true, what the details of the shift in the Cuba policy is before I can comment on whether or not I support it. I do think it's essential, though, that we continue to engage the government as an adversarial government, because what happens is if you start just exporting stuff and building the country up, and building the country up is not necessarily the right word, but if you start engaging, you have the temptation, sometimes the problem, where you might actually empower the government to stay in power. And so I think, looking at that's very complicated, but I want to see what that policy is before I think I can say whether I support it or oppose it.
We're running short on time. You were scheduled to go till 6. But we will ask this question just as it's written. Do you believe that liberals and Democrats are less American or less patriotic than conservatives?
I wanted to joke, but I realize jokes are taken too seriously nowadays. They are no less American and no less patriotic than conservatives. I think that's a good note for the last question, because again, it's kind of how I opened up. We can have passionate. I wish I could take everybody to the floor of the House, and you see, if you watch one of the 24-hour news things, turn it on, it's a Republican here and a Democrat here, and they're screaming and yelling at each other. And in many cases, I just turn it off because I don't need a heart attack at 39. But you see that. What I think is actually pretty interesting. So I've done some national television, and I've debated with Democrats on national television. But the second the camera goes off, you go to the green room and we're shaking hands and smiling and talking and being old pals. You do that on the floor of the House of Reps. One of my actual guys that I was pretty close with when he was in Congress, a guy named Dennis Kucinich. Okay, Dennis and I agree on absolutely, literally nothing. We would probably argue about the color of the sky. We were bitter political opponents, but I really liked him as a human being. I was a freshman, just been sworn in, and I'm having an open house in my office, and Dennis Kucinich pops in just to welcome me to Congress. I actually got and so you look at these things, and there is an ability to believe passionately what you want to believe, and not hate each other, and not end turkey dinner over it. So, look, I don't expect you all to not necessarily argue with me, that's my job. But I just want to say, I hope we get to the point in this country where we just kind of relax and respect people's disagreements and let the fight in politics happen as the fight was intended to happen. So, anyway, with that, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or something in between, thank you for letting me represent you in Congress, and God bless you all. Have a great day.
We're working on that list. But I mean, the thing that just flies me down all this, they are going to have porta-johns and accessible porta-johns in the parking lot. Let's see.
Yeah.